we'll start again. Just out of curiosity, because we had several stories about data, and most of the speakers gave us some warnings about responsibilities, about being locked in, about taking your role as designer to design more interactions. But of course, there is also this positive side of data that at least we're also looking for data that can perhaps be meaningful in solving these really wicked issues, that we come up with more customized solutions for third world countries, for instance. And just out of curiosity, how this audience feels about data, who thinks data can actually play a role in solving these world issues? Can I see some hands? At least a few do. Can you mention some ideas around that? What do you think? What will this role be? How can data play a role in solving these issues? Yeah, just looking at you, but maybe someone else would like to respond?
For example, I heard this example about that to track how refugees spread it, some refugees spread it through Europe, that they I'm not sure how to think about the tactic, because it's always a bit tricky to get to these data, but they provided them with a credit card.
I'm not sure if you can all hear it, but it's just mentioned that you say, well, it can, for instance, be meaningful in a refugee crisis, that, for instance, you can make these refugee floods even visible, maybe track and trace certain people. At least that's what you, can make it more visible. That's at least a positive thing of data. Nice to mention. Some other stories you would like to bring in? No, we go to the negative part again. Yeah. Well, let's at least look into aesthetics also, because that's also important when talking about data. And there is a beautiful exhibition in Utrecht called Hacking Habitat, curated by Ine Gevers, and that also tells the story about what role data plays in our current society. And Ine Gevers invited 80 artists to set up their installations, their devices, services in a former prison in Utrecht. But moreover, she also invited 30 scientists to think together with artists and designers around these topics. So we'll give the floor to Ine, but first we'll start with a little movie about the exhibition. Yes. Okay.
Rustum, 1.
The choice of venue is, I think, extremely symbolic. The prison as a panopticon, as a social panopticon, and the translation of that today into a society which is very much governed by digital networks and information technologies, which can be seen as a kind of also invisible panopticon. So, of course, the way that you navigate the show and the sense of slight claustrophobia that one feels, I think is also part of the experience. Moving beyond the title and the idea of hacking, which is something that we also associate with the digital sphere, more importantly, I think that the show actually talks about the big issues. So issues of democracy and citizenship and freedom and rights and inclusion, exclusion, and of course power, and how it is exercised and by whom.
My dream is that people understand that every one of us have the capacity to change the world, and that they recognize that they have a responsibility in co-creating their own communities. And I mean, that's it. I mean, we have to recognize that we're running out of planet, and if we don't really change the way we run our own lives and our smaller and bigger communities, we're really fucked. So wake up, people.
artwork you see is a city of electronic components that reflect in real time what is happening. The artwork lies within the themes of urban landscape, surveillance culture, privacy, and alienation in the city. The installation poses the question of who owns the data and speculates that virtual borders will soon create more systems of control. The underlying conceptual theme is the mother of Big Brother. The age of privacy is over. Imagine walking out of the door and knowing every single action, movement, sound, micro-movement, pulse and thread of information is being tracked, monitored, stored, analysed, interpreted and logged. The world we live in seems to be a much bigger brother than the Orwellian vision.
Você é muito burro, não como placar de português. Bolinho. Vou te dar dinheiro pra você comprar rádio, toda a vida aí. Associa quanto é? Cada mês. Compra 24 rádios. Tô maluco. Mete na porta-bagagem. 30 na porta-bagagem, 20 aqui dentro. Mamanico. Ei, mamanico. Teu pai é aquele doutor? Doutor Mauro. Meu pai, esse dia tá nos Estados Unidos, pá. Tá lá, live. Daqui a 2 meses, também já tô lá. Você vai no Zango, aquele lá. Você vai no Zango. Você vai no Zango. Vai viver nas tendas, você viver nas tendas. Esse já não vai subir no prédio. Você nunca visto. Esse já aqui. E você? Afinal, eu tô aqui a conversar convosco, tá perdendo tempo. Mas eu não sou rápido. Diz das 6 horas até 6 horas, 14 horas.
How we could think about the internet as a place where you could demand the right to your own truth rather than a truth or one truth.
So that we have billions of truths.
Yes.
We do have billions of truths.
We do.
Lassen Sie uns eine Brücke in die Zukunft bauen. Eine Steinbrücke von Afrika nach Europa, um das sinnlose Sterben im Mittelmeer ein für allemal zu beenden. Ein Jahrhundertwerk der Humanität. Die Brücke wurde soeben als Revision des nationalen Programms beim Fonds für die innere Sicherheit eingereicht. Baubeginn ist Frühjahr 2017. Geplante Fertigstellung 2030. Die Brücke wird die Lebensader zweier Kontinente sein und das wirksamste Mittel gegen Schleusungen und Schlepper. Doch die Menschheit kann nicht so lange warten. Wir wollen 1000 Rettungsplattformen ad hoc auf dem Mittelmeer fest installieren. Die erste Plattform wird die österreichische Regierung bereits am 1. Oktober zu Wasser lassen. Bundeskanzler Werner Faymann ruft die europäischen Regierungen hiermit energisch auf, es ihr unverzüglich und ohne große Diskussionen nachzutun.
Mein unternehmerisches Leben hat mich gelehrt, dass Investitionen sich rechnen. Es geht nicht um Großzügigkeit, sondern darum, etwas für uns zu tun, indem wir etwas für andere tun. Wir können vielleicht nicht die Welt, aber viele Menschenleben retten.
From critical social theory, that is the essence of what we do, to not take for granted the institutions and forms of power that are presented to us as normal. And in my particular field, of course, to not take war for granted and all the institutions legitimizing war. So to always, always be critical and to never take things for granted and to always look at things as
and then it stops.
Yes, it continues a bit. This is a film that we made out of the Hacking Habitat exhibition, specifically for the European Parliament in Brussels. I'm sorry.
Stand into the light. It was just a
into the light. And so it is, of course, more oriented towards Europe. The borders, etc. So, but it links a few things. For instance, here you see an artist who collected weapons at the border from Mexico and United States and made musical instruments from them. So there's lots of hacks and life hacks, and with hacking, just to tell, we don't only
because you immediately dive into the story. This is Ine Gevers, the curator of the exhibition, and it's indeed titled Hacking Habitats. And it might be good because we are talking so much about being locked in. In this case, we're literally locked in because you have this exhibition in a prison. Yeah. What's the story you would like to tell with Hacking Habitats?
Yes, that we are locked in that sense. We all live in smart cities, in the Internet of Things, etc. So what is that? Which means that we are tracked, we are followed, we are completely profiled in every way. And actually, what does that look like? That looks like a panopticon. Or you already talked about the spy phone, the smartphone as new panopticon. That's the idea. And of course, where can you then, tell your story or the Hacking Habitat exhibition the best? In an old prison, in a former prison. That's what we did. Yes.
But I assume it's also a warning then. It's really a warning for your audience to be aware to take action.
And the wonderful thing is, of course, that such a prison already takes you in the experience. So it's not only something that we know in our heads, because it's like the same, for instance, with ecology, So the former exhibition we did was very much about ecological intelligence, things we know, but somehow it needs to dig in deeper for us to really, digest it and perhaps behave in other ways. And so Hacking Habitat tries to do two things. On the one hand, contribute to an awareness of where we find ourselves now that the digital and analog world completely merge, which is not something we can do anymore with our eyes only, because, the eye is completely overrated, as everything is happening around us, is completely invisible. So all the other senses need to be activated again. So that's something we do. And on the other hand, we explain, of course, many artists, deliver tools and examples how to hack. And hacking, of course, is mostly associated with the high-tech systems. Although, actually, but people here know that better than I do, that mostly the hacking part takes place where the flaws are, and that's mostly where human beings are involved. But for Hacking Habitat, we take the whole spectrum from low-tech till high-tech. And we always tell the people, but you also see it there, that the real hacking or the live hacking we're talking about, you learn that from the survivors in the society. And that's like from refugees, people who are in debt, people who, in the care health system, don't find any support anymore. People whose identity is stolen, you name it. And these people, what they can teach each other horizontally is so much of worth for us. And actually that's also what you yeah. So
why is it so important that artists deal with these topics?
Well, it's not that they deal with these topics. Actually, why it's so important? Because at this time, we are still in a time where we actually can change. And artists, of course, like so many other activists, etc., you can look at the world in a different way. And now we're still in a moment where we can, push it in a different direction. And a different direction, and that's of course very, very important. This awareness, and then what can we do? And of course, if all people together, we are much bigger and much stronger if we do that than the 150 multinationals that at this moment govern the world. So that would be my.
All right, till when can they see this exhibition?
Until the 5th of June. Not so much time anymore, but yeah.
Worthwhile visiting. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's time for our final artist in resident. And I'll call forward Olga again, who will introduce her.
Yes, so the last artist we want to introduce for tonight is Paz Bernardo from Chile. Please, can you come over? Yeah.
Something happened. I don't know, I need to fix this.
You still need to be wired up? Or?
I mean, it was there, but now I did something.
Well,
I don't know.
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I can put it back, I guess. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So your project is here, Public Park as a Living Lab.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Almost.
Yeah, I think someone. I'm sorry. Okay, I don't know what I did.
It's not in your
My
ear
hair.
anymore. That's the problem.
All right.
This should be
okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, great. So,
yeah.
First, would you like to say something about your background? You studied philosophy and the social sciences?
Yeah, mostly social sciences, I guess. I don't know why I have an undergrad in philosophy because I don't remember much, honestly. But no, mostly sorry, that's because I'm nervous. When I'm nervous, I make jokes, boring jokes. Anyways, social science is basically about development studies, and that was my focus, and environmental studies as well. But for many years, I worked for the central government in Chile for a few years, not many years, and after that, I became friends with entrepreneurs in Chile, and that sort of was very interesting, and I think that's one thing that led me to this, because I noticed, and I started collaborating informally with them, and I noticed these different ways for them to approach problem solving or creating products or services, and it was this idea of experimentation and iteration and adaptation to the local context, which is something I didn't see in the central government. We never did that, and we never went to the street or to observe and to understand the context. So that led me towards these new in development or international development, these ideas of adaptive development and locally led change, and the importance of focusing on the communities much more, which is not a new idea, but it's kind of getting back.
Yeah, because you're very interested in working with communities, and this is also why this project is taking place. Exactly. It's a very important part of this project. Could you explain a little bit about this park and its location?
Well, it's not a park yet. We want to create a park, and I'm not the creator. I'm gonna not take that. I mean, I'm the one that said, let's build a lab as well, or do a laboratory here. But this thing started 4 years ago, and it's very locally led. Like a group of neighborhoods started this. They live there. They experience the place and every day. And it was very interesting because they're not only passionate about it, but they're also engaged with the municipality and the local government, and then they got a lot of they got the local government promising or involved in this idea. So that's a good point. And then I joined in October last year. So I'm kind of the new one and the one traveling. But anyways, so we want to create a urban living lab park in a hill, which is quite big. I think we're quite tall for Dutch standards, I guess. And anyways, But we want to, the end goal or the basic idea is to create a space for social innovation, but with the end goal of social inclusion. The data part is not solved because we don't want to start with solutions. We want to understand much better the context and what the problems are, the opportunities and the potential of the people, and people are going to experience the park and the lab. So we don't know yet how we're going to involve data, or what sort of data we're going to collect, or things like that.
Yeah, because your approach to working with communities, it's very interesting. And it's also like you really want to co-create with the community.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
So, this idea of, we think that first, like, change has to be locally led, important, like, has to be owned by the people who are having a stake on the problem or on the issues. And this city doesn't have any park, have a little squares, like this would be like the Amazon for the community, basically, this city. So we think change has to be locally led and owned by the community. And for that, they need to participate from the very beginning. They not only have to participate after we have designed the park, after we have said with the local government, hey, this is how it's going to look, like, do you like it or not, or why you like it and why you don't like it. No, it's like we need to start co-defining and redefining the problems and the opportunities with them, which is a long process and it's difficult to do. But I think it's the only way we're going to create sort of collective action to support this project in the long term. Like, because really our local governments are so bad usually, like they actually they never design policy, for example. They only implement. So they have no capabilities to design projects or programs, anyways. So yeah, I don't know if I answered.
So how do you think this project can help to change that, maybe?
Yeah, well, the thing is that we are very focused on keeping the local government involved. So the idea is that new capabilities kind of start emerging in the local government, in the community as well, of course. So we want the community to see this as their playground, not only as a place to go and relax, which is very needed, but also like a place where they can go meet diverse people and kind of see each other, because this city is super segregated. Like the rich people are in this corner and they never meet the middle classes, and there's a lot of poverty as well, and so they never see each other. I mean, I remember going to school and I remember going Sundays to do the groceries with my. I grew up in the city, that's what I'm saying, but I don't live there anymore, but I grew up there, so I'm not a stranger. Also, I'm a bit local. Anyways, but going to grocery shops on Sunday, it was so interesting because we would see the rich people in the supermarket. That would be the only time that you would see someone very different to you, with very different clothes, and they're very different, anyways. But that's an idea. In Europe, doesn't happen that much, I guess. Like, you have more, anyways. And yeah, that, I don't know if I'm speaking too fast, sorry, but.
So, one more last question. What do you hope that Age of Wonderland will bring? Yeah. Or what are you getting
Well,
here?
we actually have an amazing person that is already helping us. Yeah, she put a face like she doesn't want me to mention her, but so I'm not going to do that, like privacy. Anyways, so what we're looking, I mean, we need a lot of help, of course. We're going to be engaging with a lot of local actors and central actors. Central, I mean Santiago, the capital city. But this thing is, I mean, Age of Wonderland is great because, of course, we need to this be locally led, but that doesn't mean that it's not globally aware, like that we're not connected or we shouldn't be connected. We should learn from what others have, how have they failed. Of course, when we are not looking to copy paste things, that development doesn't happen that way, but we can learn from very different people and diverse people, and of course we don't have your type of people or the other fellows in Chile. So this is a great opportunity to learn more, and then so I'm recording every session so I can show them to the rest of the team. But we need be more specific. Like we're gonna create long-term relationships with even people that only give us feedback, like once in a while, that. Stay aware of what we're doing, because this is a long-term thing. We're talking about years to create this park. Hopefully not 10 years, but we're talking long-term. So we're trying to get people that would give us feedback and be very critical, because it's something that we will need all the time. And more specific things, like we need to know better how to prototype and how to be more visual in the way we engage with community. We don't have, for example, any artists in the team. Okay. So that's some capabilities that we need to get. Sorry.
But at least you have philosophy, so that's where it all starts with, right? At least you have philosophy in your team. That's where it all starts with.
Sincerely, if you ask me what Socrates said and everything, I just don't remember very much. But so, but the thing is that, anyways, okay.
No, well, thanks for this explanation.
Okay,
if you would like to take a seat over there, then we'll get back to you later on. Then we have one more speaker, which is Kersti Wissenbach. You're from Data Active, but you're also a researcher at the Amsterdam School of Cultural Analysis.
That's the same. So the research group is based there.
In Amsterdam. All right. Then just tell us more about your research, and then we'll get back to you for a conversation with Pas.
Okay, yeah, I will talk about civic tech and inclusive data activism and unpack what I mean with that. How to bring the human back into the data hype, that's basically sort of the questions I'm dealing with in my research at the University of Amsterdam. I'm part of a research collective called Data Activism, the politics of big data according to civil society. And we are looking at data activism from various angles. What is nice about our collective is that we are a diverse team, meaning people all coming from different angles, taking different perspectives on the field of data activism. And we are not researchers sitting in an ivory tower, but basically all of us come from the practical work field and have like years of experience in the field. And so do I. So I base my research basically on like 11 years of work in the field of what people like to call ICT for development, information and communication technologies for development, focusing on the governance field. Expanding civic tech communities or selling out our tools. This is what I'm discussing today, and how I'm using a social movement angle or approach to look at data. When I talk about civic tech, that's a term that is used a lot lately, but no one really has clear what is meant with that, and there are various definitions. So when I talk about civic tech, I mean activists, and with that I don't only mean coders, but I mean coders, designers, communicators, makers, working in the field of transparency and accountability, and not only working with data, but actually building their own tools in order to use, to unlock, to share, to advocate with data and with their skills in order to drive the change in their very contexts. Community-generated data activism, just to give you a little insight, that can be different things. There is, for instance, Mzalendo, which is a Uganda-based, Kenya-based parliamentary watch platform, which has been built there and is utilized there. There is Harassment, maybe some of you have heard about in Egypt, which is a citizen mapping tool where you can report harassment incidents. Fix My Street UK, which has also been reused, appropriated in various countries and contexts, where you can report issues in your street, in your neighborhood, so they will be fixed. But also I'm talking about community radios, I'm talking about community engagement in various different contexts with the communication channels or that actually resonate to people where they live and the means they have. So don't only think tech and online, but think of communication. The rise of civic technology in this new millennium has been organic and profound. It has not been led by politicians or corporations, nor by powerful knowledge, rich institutions or NGOs, but by individuals and loosely constituted groups with specific digital expertise and an interest in getting things done. I found that a really nice quote that basically really shows what I'm looking at and where the contrasts are of different institutions and different groups out there. So when we talk about transnational civic tech activism, we're looking at, or we're asking, like, what power shift potential is there in all these new groups that apparently are driving change as technology grows or as this whole phenomenon grows? And yeah, there is theoretical potential in terms of, we see a genuine, like, bottom-up expression of public will, so people standing up increasingly and transnationally for their rights, for the things that concern them, which means the removing of hierarchies and intermediaries, so direct governance, people directly building the tools that enable them to hold their governments to account if then accountability will occur is another story. in a community investment, so communities that actually build for each other and appropriate and reuse tools, etc., that are there for the various contexts, so kind of a shared environment and cross-learning environment. And that means cross-community investment and not like once-off investment and rebuilding, reinventing of the wheel over and over again. However, we hear a lot about data revolutions, but like these kind of maps, and there are various others, of course, make us question like, okay, where's the revolution? So that's based on a research of the Open Internet Institute and called the Archipelago of Disconnection, where you see actually big parts in the world lacking internet access, lacking any existing digital data that you could potentially work with. And these are only like the areas where you have a penetration below 10%. So if you would add like 20 or 30 or 40, you would fill quite a big space on this map. So what does that mean for us? We have a digital divide, we have been talking about since years. We do have a data divide because data is not there out there just to take it, and specifically not in a digital form. And all of that is based on common development divide. So in a lot of contexts, we do face problems since decades that have not been resolved. And like shouting big data will solve the world, or technologies usually like are just creating a much bigger gap in between. So why is that? Where does power go wrong? Basically, there are various things. In the development context, the civic tech and the community are often separated. So that means where civic tech communities build their tools, use them for their own means. It's often where they travel like into the, I just discussed with Fike, how do you call that, a tech? Majority territory, which I really like. We were discussing what term we should use, global south, whatever, because we don't really favor these terms. So majority territory, that's where most people of the world are located. It's often that it's more traditional NGOs or development organizations using the tools, but not investing in building the communities across borders, using the tools and implementing them or using them in more traditional project-based, that means time-bound, financially bound, not necessarily sustainable manners. So that also means that in those stories, NGOs are acting on behalf of local society, something that we are striving to overcome and which goes against the value set of the civic tech community. So, and doing so, seeing this now over some years means that we are risking that the civic tech field, if dynamics go like that, fall back into the traps within the developing sector that we have been witnessing over like decades. So kind of top-down and rather tech-deterministic way of how we actually strive for change. And another thing is, one main thing is how actually money flows. For every $8 given direct to a southern NGO, 12 are channeled through NGOs in the north. That was in the last civil society report published by Civicus. So that shows actually where power lies and how decisions are made. So that means it's about power that we have to actually look at, or where we have to start power redistribution rather than building tools and focusing on tools. And it's about thick data, so what is actually in data that we use, and not about big data, so just, you know, like praising, glorifying every information that is out there. Why should communities drive data and tools, as just mentioned? That's where we ask questions like, who is represented in that data? So depending on who collects data or by whom data is collected, that then, and Fike has talked about that then determines who is actually represented that. And if this data is then used to build something, to find solutions, then it reads or it takes conclusions out of that information that is most likely not representative of the people that actually intends then to serve. Who is involved in the utilization of data and tools? So who's actually in the end getting that information to do something with it? And what are these institutions or people's intention behind that? What are hierarchies within networks? What is the real participation and driving inclusive change? Like, what does participation really mean? We have to ask ourselves. there's a word went missing. It should be changed the perspective and not the label. So what I call relabeling, it's like for decades in the developing sector, we have been praised the power of the internet, then we had the mobile phone, now we have big data. And we follow those hypes and we are replicating old patterns, as I mentioned before. So the question I'm asking, and by looking at things from a social movement perspective, is like, how can we overcome or change structures if we are remaining in a kind of rotten framework? So relabeling does not change anything, but we actually need new practices. And that's why I'm looking at social movement perspective. So it's about counteracting prevailing power structures by focusing on the definition and enactment of the civic and not the tool or the data. But so refocusing on people. So I'm looking at how does collectivity unfold in my research and not how does data travel or how does technology travel. So this is a map of data repositories, so GitHub repositories, basically coders and where they are placed in the world. But that is not enough, as I mentioned initially. So looking at it from a social movement or from a civic perspective means looking at how people engage, what tactics they use, how they communicate, how they are in dialogue with each other. And that then means not only looking at coders, but at communicators, makers, users, strategists. And within those communities, then looking at the meaning making, like what creates meaning within communities? Like what are agendas of interest within groups of people? What are their value sets? What are emotions and how are they shared? How do they travel? What is the language, not in terms of, in the way of how people communicate with each other and engage with each other? And this is then from a research design perspective, basically how we look at things. So we have the Civic Tech Activism community, which is individuals, organizations, and events. It's not only individual people, but it's various levels. And we look at the aspect of inclusion in their shared actions. So that means externally we look at what are opportunity structures of people to engage. And opportunity structures can differ a lot. That is political context. This is cultural context. This can be infrastructural context. So accessibility, availability, and accessibility, which are two different things of technology, of communication means. And then we look at I look at identity formations. So how is collectivity actually created within joint action? How do people gain a sense of belonging to something and therefore keep sticking to a community and investing in it? And then internally, what are the action repertoires of those communities? So that is then means of communication, means of sharing tools, means of supporting each other in appropriating to different contexts and so on. So that's within the activism realms. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the reality that as technologies travel into various countries, and these communities expand quite fast. We do have the phenomenon that financial flows still give a lot of power to development agencies, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we have to carefully look at what are the organizational structures they're in and how far are they actually built in a way that they can serve, or at least they can support what we are looking at here and what the intentions and cultures of those new communities are, rather than hindering them in building or in growing from within themselves. And therefore we then also look at action repertoires within these agencies where they actually work in overlapping spheres. So where they use technologies and have campaigns within the realms of transparency and accountability advocacy. That is, that's more or less how we work. And I think we can find the connect between our two.
Let's try to do so, because this is your final slide, right?
Well, I could summarize more, but I think maybe it will be nice.
It might be nice indeed to
talk,
have a conversation between the two of you. If we go over there, because we need to stay in the light. What I took from your presentation, Kersti, is that you mentioned, if we go over there, we have a different perspective on camera, also have to take into account. What I took from your presentation, Kesti, is that you mentioned there is now too much focus on the technical side of data. We should more at the collectives, making the people that actually make meaning of the data. But you also mentioned the term thick data. What do you actually mean with that?
Yeah, so it's not about quantity, no, collecting random data. I mean, we have a lot of scenarios where, everyone or institutions ask for more and more data. We have a big talk about data retention in Europe, always related to saving or increasing our security in regards to terrorism measurements and so on. But if you have data, you also need to handle it, and you need to have relevant data and actually useful data. So it's more about the quality of data and who creates it and what you can read out of it than just having it for the sake of it.
All right, so like we call thick research or thick theory, that is thick data, that it is relevant, that you take responsibility for the way you gather the data, and that it is actually creating new understandings.
Yeah.
All right. Pas, if you hear this story, and I think it's very much also a call for action, that you should look at the people making sense of the data. Can you do something with this story? Is it helpful for you?
Of course, yeah. So recently, you could check. There's a nice. Probably you read it. It's a Medium article written by Tricia Wang. I don't know if you get my pronunciation, but and she is called "Why Big Data Needs Thick Data." It's the first time I heard about the concept thick data. Very cool article, and also very easy to read and everything. And so she says the same. Basically, is the data that has context and has faces and meanings and stories.
But how will you use data in your lab, your social living lab?
I was saying before that we're not assuming that we're going to use this or that sort of data or collect this and that data. We are still on the stage that we are defining the problems and the opportunities with the community. That's going to last a couple of months still. So after that, the thing is that we don't want a group of experts deciding, this is the data we want to collect, like, for example, criminality or safety and because that's what we're going to pay attention to because it's a dangerous neighborhood. And no, we want to do this in conversation with the community, as equals. And that's the issue of power, right? It's not easy to go to local government or central government and say, you know what, this expert, knows as much as one of our team members, which is Antonio, which lives illegally inside the area of the potential of the future park. So we want to do that sort of conversations where, no matter how many universities or Harvard or whatever you have, you're in equal terms you're unequal to these other community members who, anyways.
Because you mentioned before that when it comes to policy making, for instance, in your neighborhood or in this specific area, that, sometimes they don't really have a clue on what's going on, and your social lab is helpful in articulating the right questions.
This is what we want to do. Honestly, we're just in the beginning of the process, so we want to stay humble. Because we haven't really done.
What would your advice be, Kesti, in order to work with data in this social living lab?
Yeah, one very basic thing is what you describe of what you should do, that is collecting data. I think we really have to get a bit rid of that, and we've heard that before today, that idea that data is something digital in bits and bytes, but actually working with the community and mapping out the needs and context of that community, that is a process you actually should go through. And that is your data collection in that way, so communicating and also collection of information always has to happen with the means that actually resonate with the community you work with, and that might be just sitting on the ground or walking through that area that you wish to create the park or the lab in.
But this is, if I hear you correctly, very qualitative data that is very local based. How can you pass that data to other communities? Or should it stay very local?
No, let's call it maybe information or so we don't think in these digital realms. there are plenty of projects, like for decades, in how communication or media has been utilized to actually cross-empower communities, and in a lot of contexts, and in the Latin American context, that is usually community radio based, where you have a channel that has a lot of power because people trust that. That is the medium they trust and they know. So passing on lessons learned, experiences, success moments from one community to another, for instance, via those channels, that would be the way to go if that's this channel that,
And is this approach also helpful, because we heard a lot of previous speakers mentioning that, only a few institutions now maintain the data, and that we feel a bit locked in, or that we at least have to be critical in this respect. Is looking at data from your perspective much more as a bottom-up activity, creating meaning with data in a community, is that also helpful to overcome these power structures?
I think it feeds into the same argument in a way. Like we have a lot of times the problem that data or information is soaked out of these communities when you work in a very local context. Without that, there is actually that feedback loop created. That means that local communities are used just as like the guinea pigs or whatever, or the data provider. Without that, they ever know actually what happens. Not even, just not caring, as in a lot of other parts within society. Not caring, but often just not being aware, and therefore not being maybe conscious enough. But where there is this really like one-way soaking effect, and people just are used, and organizations or also a lot of NGOs are just not aware on or are struggling with how to create these feedback mechanisms. It's a big debate at the moment.
It's an issue of learning is involved, like the processes of learning inside organizations is so hard, like how to quick learn, also like to inform your actions, your daily actions or your weekly actions.
I think that's actually one of the big aims of the Age of Wonderland program, to create also a sort of learning community, a global learning community. Are there any questions from you to either these experts or the other experts that told us stories about data today? It's all clear? Yeah?
I didn't know this thick data. I didn't hear that before, this thick data, and both of you are speaking about it, so it's probably important to understand, because I'm also a curator for this project. So,
Maybe it's good to introduce you then. Let's come over here then. And people can actually see your face with the program. It's Arne Hendricks, curator of the program, yeah?
Yes, well, that's very embarrassing. But anyway, I didn't know about thick data, and as they were speaking about it, I sort of saw this huge cloud of information, and then somebody walking up to that cloud, I tried to make it analog for myself, and then pushing it from a specific perspective, and because he pushes or she pushes it, a sort of thickness comes into this cloud. So I was wondering if, let's say, if thick data is always big data, and it's just the perspective of the one that uses this data that makes it thick, or if there's a real difference, and if so, then that was my question. What is it?
Kerstin?
Yeah, I would say there's a huge difference. Because quantity cannot compensate quality necessarily. So think of, for instance, in a global context, information usually has been collected by statistical offices, like census data and so on. Currently, there is this move towards actually compensating for lack of census data. In a lot of countries, you don't have up-to-date census data by using telco data and whatsoever, and thinking that actually then is representative and you can read patterns out of that. You can, and we heard of, you can, of course, out of big data sets, you can read patterns. But then the question is like, who is represented in that data? So thinking of, I don't know, a very remote area and trying to read everything out of telecommunication data. Obviously, there is a specific segment of society that is represented in that only. That's a very simplified example maybe, but that makes clear how it doesn't work. The one doesn't ever lead to the other.
But it is true that let's say that if you talk about power in relation to information, then it is the desire and the sort of specific, let's say, reading of that information that creates its relevance in relation to a certain topic, right? So I was just that was what I was trying to understand, because I understand that you can measure basically anything, but that it only becomes relevant when somebody makes it relevant within a specific context. So that was, I'm trying to understand, let's say, I'm thinking of non-Newtonian fluid, right? That stuff when you stand on it, you sink into it, but when you push it hard, it becomes hard, right? And you can walk on it, actually. And so like I said, I'm trying to make this analog for myself. I'm trying to sort of get my hands into this big data, and I'm sure that there are other people also, how to sort of visualize it for myself, that when I would be in connection, as opposed to somebody else, that's the same data, but that it comes out completely different, almost like genes or something.
Maybe just briefly. Yeah? I mean, you know, like out of, for instance, like behavioral patterns or something, you can read a lot of just having that data, but that doesn't tell you anything necessarily about the value sets of people, about motivations of people behind that, about motivations of why they do something. And if you don't have that, you only have really half of the story. Then, of course, depends on what story.
And if you would like to give a sort of analog metaphor for Arne, what would you name?
Wasn't that?
It's probably the genes you were referring to.
A very simple analog, but I'll hear it from her, is a public, So we seem to only, give things a meaning as soon as there's lots and lots and lots of publics or people reading, or kijkcijfers. What's that in English? Yeah, kijkcijfers. Well, that of course says nothing about the work of art or an exhibition or a program, etc. That's so. I would use that analog, actually. There's this kind of.
Well, let's try it out, just to see what's the value of a program like this. What is the meaning of this sort of evenings for you? What does it bring you? Can you tell us a bit? Give us some data that we can use as feedback. No one? Yeah, understanding. That's a nice one that we can work with. Insights. And more questions. Well, that's a beautiful feedback, I feel. Can I ask you, as the initiators of this program, what do you take back after having heard these stories?
A lot of inspiration, and also finally a stronger understanding of the data after the story of Fieke. Very inspiring.
Okay, and Olga?
Well, I guess also that we should have this personal human approach to this topic, and that we should not be biased, but we should kind of see how we can exchange and how we can co-create and create meaning through different means, and actually that creatives can help us to create tools for better understanding this, or better analyzing and criticizing, but in a positive way, I think.
That's a good one, in a positive way. Well, I'm not going to summarize it, but at least what we heard, I think, is that we should indeed critically question our data-driven society, because we're easily locked in, either by power institutions or by data flows, that try to create meaning out of lots of data, and that we even can't understand ourselves what we're trying to cross-link. And I think that's what your story is actually making very clear, that if you work with big data and look more on the meaning and the questions behind that, then we can make it really useful. And the data is not something to be afraid of, but something that we can really work with, and that can empower people in social communities to make the world a bit better. To end with a positive conclusion. Thank you for visiting this provocative seminar, and I really hope you stay interested in this program and visit these fellows again in the Dutch Design Week. And if you still have the time, please pay a visit at the Hacking Habitat exhibition to get more inspired in Utrecht. Yeah. So thank you all, and thank you for setting this up. Yeah.